the journey on Mount Everest gives us some really good storylines and analogies for the journey in retirement. If you've ever studied Mount Everest, you probably know that it's 29,029 vertical feet. There have been approximately 6,000 people that have attempted to summit Mount Everest, and historical data would tell us that about 10% of them die on Mount Everest. Now, the most interesting part of that particular statistic is that the majority of those deaths on Mount Everest are actually happening on the way down the mountain.
Merit Advisors, helping improve lives by making ideal choices.
Now, for those brave enough to attempt to summit Mount Everest, they know they need to do two things. They need to climb to the top of Mount Everest successfully, possibly plant a flag or take a quick little selfie as they get to the top so they can prove to their family and friends when they get back home that they actually did make it to the top. And then they need to be able to have a plan to successfully get back down to base camp and eventually make it home to their families. Now, what the more modern day experienced climbers on Mount Everest know is that they need a completely different plan and guide to get them down the mountain than the one that got them to the top. And with that knowledge, those attempts on Mount Everest, the death rate compared to the old 10% has dropped to 2%. So a lot more successful attempts to reach the summit and actually return home safely. Now, as financial advisors specializing in retirement planning, we know that you need to do two things. You need to be able to accumulate enough assets to one day look at yourself in the mirror or look across the table at your spouse and say, enough. We've accumulated enough retirement assets to live the retirement of our dreams and reach all those goals that we want to reach and achieve during our retirement. And then you also need to have a plan to preserve and distribute those assets throughout the rest of your retirement. Now, what experienced retirees have learned is that they need a completely different guide to get down off of that retirement journey, down the mountain, and do the preservation and the distribution of those retirement assets. One of the things that can help getting down the side of the mountain is to have some tools with us. And so I'll make an analogy to what climbers need on Mount Everest and suggest that as you come down the mountain, you need to have an income plan. Income plan is kind of like oxygen climbing Mount Everest. It matters more how efficiently we use that than it does how much we brought with us. If we think of having an investment plan or a portfolio allocation, we think of that as having stability on the mountain, sure footing on the mountain, because we know that volatility in the stock market is going to happen. We know that there'll be market corrections. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And when those happen, we want to be on stable footing. If we think of tax planning, we think of our backpack on the mountain. There are required taxes and optional taxes, but we need our backpack to be as light as possible. So we only want to carry those required pieces of equipment on the mountain. And in retirement, we only want required taxes. We don't want optional taxes. If we think of healthcare planning in retirement, we think on Mount Everest, there are constantly storms that roll in very unpredictably. And in retirement, healthcare can be very unpredictable. We can have health events. We can possibly need long-term care at the end of our days here, at the end of our retirement. And so those can be very unpredictable as to whether we will need to plan for those. So to prepare for it and never need it is okay. It just gives you that much more at the very end. And then lastly, we think of legacy planning as simply returning home safely. protecting those loved ones, family, and any future generations that we may want to protect along the way.
If you have a question about what we discussed today, or you'd like to speak personally about your unique situation, please give us a call or shoot us an email. We'd love to hear from you.